email systems kind of go. It's not as good, not as strong a story with Lync or SharePoint, and that's where we start to see some of the drawbacks come in. You're not going to be able to run a public-facing SharePoint website with all the full publishing capabilities, the web content management capabilities of a SharePoint server environment. You can't do that in Office 365. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One, I mean, they're working on delivering, on coming up with solutions for internet-facing sites using SharePoint content management functionality in Office 365, but there's a lot of challenges in that as well, because if you're moving into a shared environment, let's say we write the greatest site ever, and it gets up on Slashdot or Reddit, or Will Wheaton tweets about it or something like that, right? It's mentioned on The Big Bang Theory. Well, then all of a sudden you're getting way more traffic to that site than you ever had before, and Microsoft's got to figure out how to manage that kind of a thing with an internet-facing site for anonymous access, as they are now the hosters of that site in their data centers. That's a difficult challenge to overcome, and one they're not ready to deal with yet. So, yeah, please go ahead.
How do you, as far as sandbox points go, you're assigned 300 resources.
Correct.
And there's a maximum seating for each client level.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the cycle, you get billed on the resource usage, or is it just a flat licensing cost?
I have to look that up for you, because that I haven't gotten into that level of granularity with it yet in terms of how that licenses out.
I believe you can buy more resource points. It's not 300, but
yeah, there's a seating of 5,000.
Yeah, there's a cap on your account
Yeah.
as to how much you can have, and I think you can buy more to get your cap higher, because you're essentially putting a lot of pressure on the servers at that point.
What I'm wondering is,
the cost is.
just like you mentioned, we get mentioned somewhere in Slashdot or whatever, and you start getting all these requests, and now it's definitely not dynamic. I understand that.
Yeah.
Sandbox is going to just shut down.
Well, so the thing to keep in mind is the difference between what the example I was talking about with an anonymous public site, right? Where I'm saying that's not available. That kind of capability is not available today, right? With the full SharePoint, you do have public site capabilities in Office 365, but it's woefully 1990. You don't have just anywhere near the capabilities you do in SharePoint servers. In the current SharePoint environment, where you are in the sandbox and you do have to worry about, to his question, to his point, one of the things that's present with the SharePoint sandbox solution model is this idea of resource points. They've built in this formula that says, okay, this site has a pool of, let's say, 5,000 resource points. And for every X number of CPU cycles or RAM or data throughput that's required by a component on a page, it's going to draw down from that resource pool. And at a certain point, you're going to run into, as you draw down from that pool more and more, you're going to run out of resources to consume. You're going to be throttled, or you're going to have to, the site might not be available until the next day when that resource pool resets again. Right? That's what's happening with this sandbox model. One of those ways they're trying to really kind of manage and constrain the amount of performance hit that a given site is going to take, because these are in shared environments. Everything runs. Your Exchange Online environment is sharing servers in the Microsoft Data Center with other Office 365 tenants. So with that sandbox model, that requires authentication. That requires login. So because of that, you're not going to have the unanticipated public onslaught kind of traffic. But that does then say, the organization needs to be cognizant of that and say, okay, thinking about some of the typical cycles where this happens, like the beginning of every quarter, or the day that bonuses are announced. That typical day when the HR site gets DDoS'd by everybody in the company because they want to know what their bonuses were. those kinds of things. That's when you know, as an organization, you still have to plan for that and make sure that you have the resources available in Office 365 to handle that. You know, and you have to be writing. You know, it also puts another, when you are doing customizations, it puts the onus on the developer to be very mindful of that and to write effective, efficient code that minimizes the use of those resources.
It might be better to just write JavaScript functionality if you really don't have to use the sandbox or worker process.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of throw this up. Office 365 is a great example of the fight between John and me. So John wants to control the environment and make sure everything's stable and permanently up and has very little spikes and valleys and make sure everything. I want to do anything I want to do. And so there's limitations that Office 365 puts on. You had mentioned upgrade costs. So Microsoft wants Office 365 SharePoint upgrades to be in line with actual SharePoint upgrades at some point. But they're usually about a year behind right now.
Yeah.
If you are unhinged and able to do anything you want on your SharePoint farms, then your upgrades become more difficult because you will have done something invariably that was difficult to upgrade to the next version. 365 limits that. But not your sandbox. You know, from our perspective, from the developer side, Azure is a different sandbox. And so we have figured out, using business connectivity services and JavaScript and jQuery and the client-side object model, that we can build other sandboxes and tack those onto Office 365 and lose a significant degree of our limitations. But at the same time, now we have responsibility for the development of that and kind of maintenance.
And even that, I mean, so one of the big things, one of the big announcements last year at Microsoft's SharePoint conference in October was that they were making the business connectivity services available to Office 365. They were rolling that feature into Office 365. And it was a great story because they announced it in October, and by Thanksgiving, that feature was being made available to plans that had the license where that BCS capability became available. I think it's the E3 level license. That was being rolled in November. So they are very rapidly revising the features and functionality in the service. But even then, the BCS also on the other side of the equation highlights a very key point in how these services do differ from their on-premises environments. The business connectivity services in SharePoint Server, the idea of it is it allows you to integrate data from other line of business applications into your SharePoint environment. So they want SharePoint to become that central data hub where you view all of your HR reports from PeopleSoft and all of your CRM data from Dynamics and pulling in all these different contents, whether it's an Oracle database or a SQL Server resource or some other line of business application. That's the role business connectivity services plays, and it's a very rich story. Interestingly, in Office 365, they have some limitations around how you can access those data services. It requires a WCF data service in front of whatever you're connecting to with business connectivity services. So they've put some entrenchment around that as well in terms of how you can use BCS in Office 365 as opposed to how you can use it in an on-premises environment. Yeah.
I noticed the time. I need to ask this question and move you off of some of this. Can you speak to the issue of remote use of the information, i.e. you have Office stored on a laptop, and you need to link it such that you can work with it. I'm having challenges with that.
Okay,
so what is also planned with that?
So there's a couple of pieces to that puzzle at a very so the biggest challenge there, as I understand it, is it's an identity management issue. So one of the things I do really like about Office 365, and I kind of mentioned on a slide earlier, but I glossed over it. They offer a lot of options in terms of simplifying the user identity problem with these external services. Oftentimes, if you're an existing company who's gone to Office 365, you already have made an investment in Active Directory or some sort of other account management repository kind of thing. Let's say you have on-premises Active Directory. Well, with BPOS, when you went to MSO, to the cloud, you set up directory synchronization and it copied your accounts up, but then you still had this issue where you had to manage your passwords locally and you had a separate set of passwords up in the Microsoft cloud. Yeah.
I service small to medium-sized businesses that don't have Active Directory.
Okay.
Because the price here is right for those.
Right.
But the synchronization for them to work at home and not have, or don't have the connectivity sometimes is important. And that's where I'm focused. To try and get an understanding.
Well, I mean, so there's, there is some tooling. So there's a tool called SharePoint Workspace. It's a client application that allows users to take SharePoint collaboration sites and work with them offline in a client. So let's say that I'm flying somewhere and I want to work with documents that I've got in my SharePoint site. Before I get on the plane, I synchronize SharePoint Workspace with my SharePoint site, whether that's a SharePoint running on a server. It's also available in SharePoint Online. And then I can work with those documents offline. When I come back online, those changes are synchronized back up. But I think what you're talking about is more of it's still the identity.
Outlook on the laptop and Outlook up there. How do you sync that? In other words, I made a change, and when I go up and can reconnect to Office 365, I thought it would automatically.
And it should. I mean,
I have challenges all over the place on that.
Okay. Well, I mean, the setup client that's one of the things that I've always enjoyed about this is the setup client is going to connect connect Outlook automagically for you. It's going to set up all your configuration settings. And you're not doing this in any sort of like they're not doing virtualized app virtualization or anything like that, right? They're not doing a Citrix environment.
No.
No, I mean, these are all, yeah.
They are running in virtual machines. I didn't think that would make any
I wouldn't
difference.
think that. I mean, not if the application is virtualized. I mean, not if the full server is
The thing
computer.
is that we're getting double calendar entries for identical, double contacts. The nasty.
And that's one of these things that, in my experience, I'm not trying to be flip about it. It's just always worked.
Okay.
And so.
That's not what I want to hear, but
I know.
okay.
I know. And it's.
I'll check it out.
Well, let's talk a little bit afterwards.
Okay.
I just want to. It could be a couple of different things, but this is all in probably the P class of licenses, the P1, P2.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Let's chat
Because
afterwards.
that's what it was. One of the intent of
Absolutely.
Office 365 is for us to be able to service our small to medium-sized customers.
Yeah. I completely understand.
Okay.
And I know, and this is another good thing to remember. As a service provider, Office 365 does present some real challenges as well, because one of those things that I mentioned in terms of being baked into the cost is support, right? Now, for the P SKUs, it's all you have available is the online support forums, which they do have staffed by some Microsoft personnel. But these P SKUs, the professional SKU levels, it's for organizations with 1 to 50 users, and that's a hard cap at 50 users. You can't go above that. And it's a lower price point than the enterprise, but the functionality is there's a little bit of a downgrade there. And the big thing is you don't have a phone number you can call for support. That's just not available in the P SKU. As a service provider, that puts a lot of challenge on you to understand and work with your customers and help them understand the support model, because you either have to get them comfortable with charging you, or you charging them for your support time to help them when they're already paying for support, hypothetically baked into that monthly subscription price, or you have to train them to go to Microsoft, use that support mechanism, the forums, or if you're in an enterprise plan, actually using the phone numbers, calling that rather than calling you, but still coming to you when they want to do upgrades or customizations or other kinds of services. So it's a real challenge for service providers to train customers the right way, to make sure that that's still a beneficial relationship for you. So it does make the basics trickier, and this is things that we take for granted, like printing, like shared storage. Those kinds of things when we start, if you have printers in your organization that you email, you have the ability to email a document to that printer that you want to have printed. Well, when your email server is now hosted out somewhere in the cloud, you have to understand, okay, how do I configure that SMTP server now on that printer? And do I have that printer, that printer then has to have internet access, right, to be able to see that SMTP server in the Office 365 environment. So these kinds of things do get a lot trickier, the basics, there is some training you have to go around. If people are used to having their H drives and those H drives all go away, because now the expectation is they need to use SharePoint to store these documents, there may be some training that has to occur there to make sure that they're comfortable with that change. There are some other options out there available for how we can overcome some of those shortcomings. Tools like Small Business Essentials 2011, it gives you the ability to have a host a print server, have an Active Directory, have some shared storage if you want it. There's Windows Azure. There are other cloud options out there for things. If you want identity in the cloud, if you want security in the cloud, if you want storage in the cloud, Dropbox or Box.net. Lots of different options out there, as well as a lot of vendor tools to make that a little bit smoother, as well as some of the migration assistance. There are migration tools available for Exchange online, moving from a wide variety of on-premises email platforms up into the cloud, as well as some SharePoint migration tools out there from vendors like Casal and MetaViz. There we go. The other thing to keep in mind is you have to be prepared when you remove those capabilities from an organization, those IT capabilities, and focus on what your business does best. You have to be prepared for what to do when you need those capabilities again. Do you have a preferred vendor that you're going to engage and bring in and help you when you have a problem with your Active Directory or with your Exchange online service? You have to know when you're reducing your own internal capabilities how you're going to replace that long term when you have a need for it. And then the other thing is you have to be prepared for the fact that service level agreements, service capabilities are different in a cloud context than they are in an on-premises kind of environment. When something goes down in our data center, we have the ability to very easily find out what's going on, get information back from the IT organization managing those resources in the data center. In the cloud, you are strictly limited to only the information that your provider makes available to you. So when Amazon goes down, there's not a lot of information out there available about what's happening with that outage. When Office 365 goes on, and it was last year, it was the first year for the service, it went down a couple times. There were outages in Ireland. There are outages in the U.S. Due to things like DNS problems, network connectivity, all those kinds of things. You're not going to have the kind of deep kind of insight into those systems that you are used to having with an on-premises environment. So you have to be ready and comfortable with what happens with those outages. A lot of Amazon customers, there was a big Amazon outage last year where some of their data centers went down. And it was very interesting because a lot of their customers thought, well, we've got the cloud, so everything's highly available within that. But they didn't. But they opted for the cheapest service from Amazon. And that service, while there was some high availability built into it, that service didn't account for, okay, what happens when an entire data center gets taken offline by a DNS outage? And because the customers, that were using, I think there were some big name customers that were down by it. There was places like, I think Dropbox was down. Some of these services that did not take into account that lack of the specific type of high availability they were getting from Amazon, they lost their services too when Amazon went down. Now some providers like Netflix, that was the one thing they did right last year. They actually knew what was going on and they architected their application so they were taking advantage of redundant capabilities across the Amazon stack. So when the East Coast Amazon S3 storage went down, their application was well architected enough to fail over and use Amazon storage on the West Coast. But other providers didn't have that kind of flexibility and that kind of capability. So you have to understand with Office 365, with any of these cloud vendors, what kinds of capabilities you are getting, what kind of service level agreements you're seeing, those kinds of things. It's very important to know what you're purchasing and understand that, go beyond just the marketing speak about the fact that it's the cloud, it's elastic, and it's redundant. And so if you've seen the movie The Big Lebowski, you'll know the importance of having a good rug to kind of tie the whole room together. If not, I apologize. I like The Big Lebowski, so I get to make what's up on the screen. The thing to really understand with Office 365 is what its strong points are and what its weaknesses are. It's great for new organizations. That we love to talk about in development kind of environments, the green field kind of a project where it's a clean slate. When you don't have a lot of baggage, going into Office 365 can be a very attractive kind of perspective because you can get up to speed with it so fast and you get so much capability for a manageable investment. It's great for cost-sensitive organizations that want a lot of capabilities and a lot of bang for their buck. If you've got very specific, very specialized requirements around these server platforms, Office 365 may not be a very good fit. If you've got a lot of, especially on the SharePoint side, if you've got a lot of customization planned, a lot of custom development, or if you're doing a lot of business intelligence capabilities in that SharePoint stack beyond collaboration and search, then it may not be a great fit. If you already have made an extensive investment in your IT organization and you plan on keep on doing that in the future, this may not be a great fit. So, questions? That's I think everything I've got, and I think I'm kind of wrapping up a little bit ahead of schedule. So, I've got plenty of time for questions if there are any. Yeah.
You talked about migration from on-premise Active Directory into one of these.
So there's two pieces to that. Okay, there's the idea of you can do migration or you can do federation. So the idea behind federation is I'm going to keep my Active Directory, and basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to establish a trust relationship with Office 365 that tells Office 365, hey, when a user goes to log into my environment, instead of using an account stored in Office 365, I want you to come down to my Active Directory. I'm going to set up an Active Directory Federation Services relationship. We're going to do a trust relationship between my Active Directory and the cloud. And so Office 365 will say, well, Pat, it's a claims-based authentication process, okay, where they're passing a ticket down to your Active Directory. Your Active Directory is saying, yes, we authenticate that this person is who you say they are, and here's their credentials. And then Office 365 is then going to pass that claims, is generate a ticket for that user to grant them access to the services that they're authorized for.
So do you have to make changes to your Active Directory
To establish that federation relationship, yes, you're going to have to set up Active Directory Federation services. For smaller Active Directory environments, you can do that. You can set that up on your different controllers. You will also, if you want to have devices outside of your network connecting, you're going to have to establish a proxy so that those connections can come out.
Right now, if you have an AD, you would have to go to ADFS,
yes,
and then you'd have to link that with this, so it would federate.
Correct. Yes. So ADFS, and it's also the kind of thing where that's a very important system to configure highly available because that is a single point of failure. If your ADFS connection goes down, when your users try to go up to Office 365, and Office 365 cannot come back to your Active Directory and get your information, they can't get into Office
So
365.
that's one path, right?
Yes.
So if I'm an IT organization, no, not an IT organization, a small business, a
Mhm.
medium business, I just want to get rid of my IP. I
Yep.
don't want to maintain any federation services or anything of that sort. Now, what are my options when I have an Active Directory?
Okay, so when you have an Active Directory, you have two options. And you can either start from scratch, just start over with brand new accounts in Office 365, leave behind Active Directory. Okay, and I'm not saying that's necessarily the most appealing one, but it's it's an option. I want to throw that out there. The other option is to set up directory synchronization, do a one-way sync. So that's a copy. It's a copy operation. Basically, the DirSync tool, directory synchronization tool, is a very specialized version of Forefront Identity Manager. So what that will do is you set that up. You give it the ability to scan your Active Directory, and it's going to take every account, every mail-enabled account in your Active Directory, and it will copy them to Office 365. You can do that as a one-time synchronization and then turn it off and live entirely in the cloud. Or if you want to keep Active Directory, then you can have that going ongoing as a scheduled task on a daily basis. It synchronizes, changes up, or I think by default it might go every half hour to do that synchronization.
So would that automatically prepend like a claim string or claims token?
So then what in that situation, what you have to remember is you have two different accounts. You have your Active Directory account, okay, and then through DirSync, you are copying a new account up to Office 365. Okay, so at that point, that's a copy. The Office 365 is a copy of and that just lives. It's a claims. Office 365 is all claims-based authentication. So that's a claims-enabled account up there, and you're going to you might use the same UPN, user principal name, to log in to the value would be the same, but those are two completely separate accounts.
Separate domains.
Yeah, well, I mean, it will look like the same domain. It's the same suffix, same UPN suffix, right? But it will be two different accounts.
Basically, they're two different.
Exactly, two
So
different
You're
repositories.
not passing through authentication. You have to
Correct.
log in when you
And the challenge there is if you change your password in Active Directory, that change will not synchronize across. Passwords do not synchronize with directory
Unless you
synchronization.
do an explicit sync again.
No,
Or is
passwords
it just a one-time process?
passwords don't sync. You have a separate password in Office 365.
Okay.
If you have an account, Federation, you have accounts in Active Directory. You have no account. Your account, there's no physical account in Office 365 with Federation. The accounts are all local. Okay. Now there is a directory sync process that's going on still. There is still DirSync is still needed for ADFS, but it's not. It's just saying it's doing a mapping, right? It's saying, okay, this account maps to this Active Directory account. Kind of thing. Hey, in this case, go back to this Active Directory.
Sure.
With DirSync only, you're copying, you're creating it, you're mirroring those accounts. It's just the accounts, not the passwords. So you have two different passwords, you have two different accounts, you have two different sets of password policies that you really have much less ability to manage the terms of that password policy in Office 365 than you do locally. So then it becomes a major training issue for your users. If you change your Active Directory password and let's say you're in the habit of your Office 365 is the same value, right? That change will not sync across. The user has to know, okay, I've got to go change it in Office 365 as well.
Why would you even maintain a local AD if you're doing a one-time migration of all your?
I don't know, and that's right. If you do one-time migration, turn off the lights in Active Directory, then you're just managing Office 365.
So
Yeah.
now, with that being said, then since you turn off your Active Directory, you're not maintaining anything. Small and medium businesses might wish to. Then the point of single sign-on in 365 is basically just the duration of the session duration of the cookie. So you log on once, there's no concept of single sign-on because you're not logging on to your company's domain.
Well,
You're on the internet.
yeah, and this is I think this is why I kind of struggled with his question a minute ago. Is I haven't worked a lot with the P class those SKUs, those environments where you don't have an Active Directory locally. You know, a lot of what I've been looking at is that federation. A lot of the I've talking to organizations that are looking to do that federation. So for those smaller environments where you're talking about accounts in the cloud and nothing locally, I haven't played with that yet. Now, you do run a client. There is an application, a one-time setup client that you run locally, right? That you run that sets up Link, it sets up Outlook, and it configures those connections up to the server, the Exchange Online and Link Online servers, right, for the client applications. And I honestly, because I have on my primary work computer, I'm connecting to Sagetti's email servers and everything like that. I haven't set up a client VM yet and tried. I have a P account that I could do this with. I need to. But I haven't tried running that setup application, doing a test client.
I would imagine that it would automatically. We're at GM right now. We use ADFS, and I don't log into GM's domain, say, but I log in through ADFS, and the session expires based on when my computer expires.
Yeah, but I just don't know how much control over that, and that's another one of those things that Microsoft is likely going to hold on to a little bit tightly.
Yeah, I'm definitely not seeing any place in the admin center.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's you can't configure how long it will be before a user before their session expires when they log in. That's going to be a difficult thing. Please, I'm not trying to cut anything off. I'm just putting that up there again. So if you want it, what I'll do is I'll post this slide deck to my website within the next couple of days. So if you'd like to see that, I'll have I put everything up on SlideShare, so I'll have a link off of my website where you can go download that from.
So this same thing that we're talking about, is that a separate download? Is there a license?
It's a free download. They have a 32-bit and a 64-bit version of it. I would recommend going with the 64-bit version, just because hopefully the 32-bit. x86 applications, with the exception of Office, will probably go the way of Vista and usher off into extinction at some point. Although I hope the same for XP. Fisher Price OS pains me. But DirSync, sorry. So DirSync, as I said, it's a very specialized version of Forefront Identity Manager, and that's their enterprise account centralization. So if you've got a Sun1 account repository and Active Directory, and you need to make sure that changes in Active Directory are synchronized to Sun1, you're going to bring in Forefront Identity Manager. It used to be known as Microsoft Identity Integration Services, MIIS. It's a really complex platform. I have to hand it to Microsoft. With DirSync, they actually did a really good job of streamlining it down for specific use, as opposed to the user profile service in SharePoint Server, which is a giant steaming turd. It's the prime APIs of SharePoint Server 2010. Sorry, another inside joke. But DirSync is a very specialized tool. It does have some requirements. Depending on the size of your organization, you want to take a look at how many users you're going to be synchronizing. Because what DirSync will also do is it installs SQL Server Express as its backend database. So if your database, they have some good information out there about get the guide about DirSync. It will talk to you about this, about what point you're going to need to have. Instead of SQL Server Express, you might need full SQL Server, because Express in 2008 R2 is limited to 10 gigabyte databases. 2008 it's 2 gigabytes. 2008 R2 it's 10 gigabytes. So try to get 2008 R2 Express whenever you can.
That's like the intermediate platform it uses to migrate to.
Well, I mean, so Microsoft is trying to make SQL Server the oxygen that every server product needs to live. The only two products in the server stack that don't use SQL Server are Exchange, which still runs on Jet, and Active Directory, which I think also still runs on Jet or something. So from a database perspective, that's just what they use. And Express is free, so they're getting away from the Windows internal database, because that was too confusing. But just be mindful of scaling requirements around DirSync, but otherwise it's a free tool. Get the 64-bit version. You cannot put it on a DC. That's another requirement. To set it up, you'll need to do the installation with an account that has enterprise admin rights in the domain. But that's just so that it can configure its service accounts with the least privilege rights that those accounts need. And then you can pull enterprise admin off of that that install account once you're done.
You need to be running it on the domain as a domain administrator.
So the install account needs enterprise admin rights, not just domain administrator rights. It needs keys to the kingdom, and it needs the install account. And so and that's just a setup account. The setup account, when it runs, is going to go create at least one service account, and in a specific special OU, and give that account the rights the account needs. Okay, and then once that's done, you can take the enterprise admin rights away from your install account.
Okay.
Don't touch the DirSync account. But it's kind of its own little special managed account kind of thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you guys very much for your time today. I really appreciate the opportunity.